According to the ancient Sumerians, Babylonians, Hebrews, Egyptians, Chinese, Olmecs, Mayans, Romans, Greeks, and American Plain Indians, the war in the heavens transpired between Jupiter and Venus. All stories foretell of Venus, goddess of fertility and love, who turned and instead brought evil, catastrophe, misfortune, and a great flood to earth in the form of the great serpent, who we now call Lucifer, the morning star. In Greek mythology, Venus is Aphrodite, goddess of sex, love, and beauty. This lines up perfectly with Satan's description in Ezekiel chapter 28, verses 12 to 17, where it says, Son of man, take up a lamentation upon the king of Tyrus, and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord God, Thou sealest up the sum full of wisdom and perfect in beauty. Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was thy covering, the sardius, topaz, and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, and the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, and the carbuncle, and gold. The workmanship of thy tabrets and out of thy pipes was prepared in thee the day that thou was created. Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth, and I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou was created, till iniquity was found in thee. By the multitude of thy merchandise, they have filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned. Therefore I will cast thee as profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy thee, O covering cherub, from the midst of the stones of fire. Thy heart was lifted up because of thy beauty. Thou hast corrupted thy wisdom by reason of thy brightness. I will cast thee to the ground. I will lay thee before kings, that they may behold thee. In this war, Venus is the great serpent, or Azazel, and Jupiter is the archangel Michael. Venus broke free from Jupiter's grasp, then snaked through the heavens, attacking Mars, scripting her what the Indians of Mexico and Central America call his coat of arms as well as his skin, meaning Venus stripped Mars of her atmosphere and seas, and then rushed so closely to Earth that it plunged Earth into an icy, watery darkness that was then followed by cataclysmic floods almost 12,000 years ago. In some texts, the Mesopotamians and Babylonians entitled the great serpent with Venus and called him Enki, who was the serpent god of knowledge, wisdom, science, and the bringer of rain, hence the flood. Enki is the offspring of An, or Anu, who is the supreme god and prime mover in creation, embodied by the sky. He is the first and last ancestor, and all deities are his offspring. He is the utmost god and god of gods. His consort is Ki. This is where the word Anunnaki and Ankh come from. Enki is associated with wisdom, magic, incantations, arts, crafts. He is the literal god of semen. Enki's son is Dumazid, who is listed on the Sumerian kings list and is also the deity Tammuz, mentioned in the Bible as the deity worshipped during the origins of Christmas in Ezekiel, and also the original deity of worship for Valentine's Day, and whom is represented by Cupid. The thought behind Christmas is to pay homage and mourn Tammuz's death. Since he was known as a great shepherd, the tree was used as a representation of the then and now dead deity. They would then adorn him, the tree, with precious jewels and gold, of which now we don't use precious jewels and gold, but we do use shiny and elaborate decorations and lights in replacement to upkeep this tradition and symbolism. After this, according to tradition, they would place offerings to the deity Tammuz underneath the tree while bowing to him. This is today replaced unknowingly by the position most people take when placing gifts underneath the tree, by crouching down a bit or going completely on their knees or to the floor in some form or fashion while placing gifts underneath the Christmas tree. This represents the bowing to Tammuz. Together, Ishtar and Tammuz represent the god and goddess of Venus, and Ishtar is the original deity of celebration for Easter, as the Easter rabbit and egg represent fertility and sex. Get it? Ishtar, Easter. Well, she is also the blueprint for the Statue of Liberty, and the reason the Statue of Liberty faces east, as east is the direction Ishtar's worshippers faced when they turned their backs on the temple of Yahweh and faced east to worship the sun, as stated in Ezekiel chapter 8 verse 16. The Statue of Liberty's torch represents the light of Venus, or the light of Lucifer, and the reason why Freemasons are also called the Sons of Light. Tammuz is married to Inanna. Inanna is also referred to as Ishtar, who is known as the Sumerian goddess of love, sexuality, prostitution, war, the morning star, and the divine personification of Venus. Ishtar is one of the 7 judges of the underworld. Each judge equates to an archangel and also represents the origin of the present 7 days of the week. Together, Ishtar and Tammuz represent the god and goddess of Venus and are the deities of original celebration for Easter, as the Easter rabbit and egg represent fertility and sex. Ishtar is the most prominent female deity of Mesopotamia and is most infamous for trying to take over the dominions of her counterparts, especially that of her elder sister Ereshkigal, who rules the underworld. She is unsuccessful due to the other 6 judges of the underworld. The significance of this story for us is that Ereshkigal's husband is Nergal, who is the embodiment of Mars. Just like Ishtar and Tammuz are the god and goddess embodiment of Venus, here we can place Ereshkigal and Nergal as the god and goddess representation of Mars, which traces back to my earlier mention that Samael is the ruler and overseer of hell and death, and the embodiment of Mars. And Azazel is Lucifer, the embodiment of Venus, who today we call the devil or mononymously called Satan. This helps confirm the separation of the two in their current roles. Enlil is Enki's brother. He is the god of wind, air, earth, and storms, and the chief of all the gods, who is thought to be an extension of Anu. Said to be fatherly and one who watches over humanity and cares for their well-being, he is the parallel of the ancient Babylonian god Marduk, who is represented by the celestial body of Jupiter. In a lot of ancient texts, Michael is not representative of Mercury as he is in Islam when mentioned earlier. Instead, he is profoundly known as the embodiment of Jupiter, which makes sense when lining up the evidence that he is the chief of the archangels and all other angels. It was Jupiter who the ancients recall being opposite of Venus, and it is the archangel Michael who was leading the 2/3 of heaven against Lucifer and his army of 1/3 of heaven. And with that, we can presume that Enlil is the archangel Michael, and that Enki in conjunction with Ishtar is a representation of Lucifer, the morning star, who is Venus, who is also Azazel. Enki and Enlil are 2 deity brothers who are at odds with each other and represent good versus evil. They are the 2 most notable deities out of all the Anunnaki because of this disposition. Nonetheless, Mayans and Aztecs associate the great serpent with Venus and call her Quetzalcoatl. They reference Quetzalcoatl as she who tore out the eye of the sun and plunged the earth into icy, watery darkness, when referring to Venus's battles with the sun god. The Egyptians call the great serpent Apep, who they claim was the great serpent who represents cosmic evil, who not only threatened Earth and the other planets, but also threatened the sun god Ra, who had to repeatedly battle Apep during his nightly journey through the underworld. And it has been theorized that Venus was once actually a moon that orbited Jupiter alongside Uranus and Neptune. So maybe this is a parallel. Scientists are still to this day trying to figure out how these planets broke free from their orbit.
This is Apep. This is Quetzalcoatl. This is a dragon depicted on a temple in India. Do you see the similarities? Serpents and dragons adorn the entrances, interior, and exterior of many Asiatic temples for a reason. Where do you think the origin of the Chinese dragon comes from? At its core, the Chinese dragon originates from the great serpent.
In mysticism, dragons always talk. They have ancient knowledge of original knowledge. They can foresee the future and are healers like you would see in a lot of TV shows. All of this magical and so-called fantasy and mythological stuff we see on TV has real origins. This one in particular, though, stems from that legend of the great serpent who is Satan. Look at the book of Adam and Eve, chapter 18, verses 6 through 9, when the great serpent is punished for yet another time after tricking Adam and Eve, which angers God even more. It says, "Then the word of God came to the serpent, and said unto it, In the first instance I made thee glib, and made thee to go upon thy belly, but I did not deprive thee of speech. Now, however, be thou dumb, and speak no more, thou and thy race, because in the first place has the ruin of my creatures happened through thee, and now thou wishest to kill them. Then the serpent was struck dumb and spoke no more. And a wind came to blow from heaven by command of God that carried away from the serpent, from Adam and Eve, threw it on the seashore, and it landed in India. Now think of India today and how Hinduism matches the worship of many gods, but behind the highest deities are Nagarajas, which are serpent kings from Naraka, which is Hinduism hell. They protect these Hindu deities, and you can often see them depicted as 7 conjoined serpent heads stemming from behind the backs of these Hindu deities. Now think about how India is famous for snake charming. Then think about how Hindu temples have elaborate serpent statues adorning it, and somehow imprinted on the breast of these serpent statues are the symbols that represent a specific chakra. The symbol of each chakra is literally the visual of the sound made for each specific chakra. This is somatics. Nobody ever wondered how they knew how a sound looked. Scientists are just now discovering somatics. Remember how somatics was taught by Shemjaza, the subordinate of the great serpent? Some of the people in India and neighboring territories believe to this day that they are descendants of serpent beings, and their culture actually revolves around that. These are the Naga peoples. Naga is another name for mystical serpents in Hinduism that are under Nagarajas. If you've watched the second part of my Mermaids Real series, you will have a more in-depth understanding of what and who Nagas are.
The Naga people get their name from Nagas, which are, in a nutshell, Asiatic mermaids who can appear as full serpents or half human, half serpent.
According to a lot of research I conducted, I found that the Garden of Eden was either in Egypt or the Horn of Africa, which would explain the very similar cultures revolving around certain deities and serpents in both lands, and in similar cultures founded by a certain somebody who was not solid on the idea of throwing away and separating from the knowledge taught prior to Noah's flood, and instead pioneered everything he touched with the gnosis of the fallen / Anunnaki. I'll go more into detail about that later in this series, however. In the Apocrypha of John, it tells of how Michael and Lucifer were battling each other and their armies, and how Lucifer was thrown down to the earth in defeat and dishonor, and how the war in heaven would now be waged on earth for the prize of the souls of man. In the Apocrypha of John, it says, "And Lucifer, whose name became Satan, the devil, and Mestema, was thrown down to the earth in defeat and dishonor." It then goes on to say, however, that then Satan entered into the serpent, for the serpent was willing, and he waited until the time of deceit was at hand. After the completion of exactly 7 years there, and in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, the serpent, which God had created with them in the earth, came to Eve to incite them to go contrary to the command of God, which he had given them. And after this comes the forbidden fruit story, which follows accordingly to what we are told in Genesis. Scientific findings in recent history and technology was provided to us by the ancients and believed to be personification and myths. The whole time they were telling us the blatant truth, which seemed unfathomable because mankind in recent history has not interacted with those of the spiritual realm in such a close manner in centuries upon centuries. So these stories simply sound like tales. But long ago, the world was much different. God, the angelic, the fallen, mankind, and all the creatures and everything in between interacted constantly and closely, and it was normal. It wasn't superstition, it was real and everyday reality at that. Funny, because modern technology now tells us that Mars really was once just like Earth and covered in rivers, oceans, lakes, and seas with a potential atmosphere that was oxygen and nitrogen rich around 10,000-ish years ago. And around the same time, there was an ice age on Earth that ended just as fast as it began. The way this ice age affected random parts of the Earth instead of the entire planet was as if there was actually an ocean floating in outer space that our planet crashed into. This makes sense sense if Mars was truly stripped of her precious atmosphere and waters, and if it was thrashed at Earth. They've even found evidence that this ice age started with a sudden massive flood, followed by drastic drops in temperatures, preceded by a rapid increase in temperatures that were followed by more and more flooding that led to the sea levels rising 400 feet. I bet that swallowed whole civilizations. Did someone say Atlantis or the lost continent of Mu? I thought so. And poor Antarctica still hasn't been the same since. If man could only explore the ocean's depth. However, we have never even went 7 miles deep into the ocean because it is impossible with our current technological advances. We cannot even map the ocean's floor. 99% of the ocean's floor is unexplored. The 1% explored is from the shallow oceanic waters, and only 5% of the ocean has been explored, leaving 95% of the Earth's oceans unexplored. The ocean makes up 70% of Earth, meaning 65% of Earth is unexplored. That's crazy. For more discussions of conspiracy theories or odd and unusual things that happen on this planet or in outer space or anywhere, please like, comment, and subscribe. I will not let you down. Also, what are some conspiracy theories you would like for me to talk about? Because I've heard a lot, but obviously I haven't heard them all. Please comment down below and let me know.